to our panellists. Welcome to Audits Who Indulge. Great to see you, and welcome to you at home. Thank you very much for watching. You can just sit back and enjoy the programme, or you can take part in the conversation on social media, which is always pretty lively. Anyway, let's kick off with our first question, which is from Finola Gowers.
Has the government's EU reset deal given away more than we have gained?
So that was Monday. We found out about that. You were absolutely in the nerve centre of sorting this deal out. Have we given away more than we have gained?
Absolutely not. This deal is a real win for Britain. I set out with objectives of delivering a deal that would be good for jobs, that would lower bills, and that would be good for securing our borders. What we secured in those negotiations for the country, and by the way, don't take my word for this when I say about the price of the weekly shop falling, just listen to what leading supermarkets are saying about how it will change cost pressures. Listen to Morrison's, listen to M&S, listen to Lidl. When I say that what we've done on energy will bring energy bills down, don't listen to me, listen to what Octopus Energy have been saying about bringing bills down. And on borders, issues like serious and organised crime, where international criminals do not understand, recognise or respect borders, we will have more tools now, like facial recognition, sharing of information, enabling us to keep people in this country safer. We have a security and defence partnership too with the European Union, complementing our membership of NATO. So I've no doubt at all that this deal is going to make Britain safer, more secure, and indeed more prosperous. It is in our national interest, and other parties should be supporting it.
Well, Kieran Foster's supporting the Conservatives. Kemi Badenoch has said she's going to reverse the whole thing.
Well, let's be clear about what's happened this week. This is a Labour Party that is desperate in government for a positive news headline, and that's not surprising when you think about the challenges they're facing on economic growth, on unemployment, on things like the winter fuel payments, which they cut for 10 million pensioners. They're incredibly unpopular, and they're just desperate for anything that makes it look like they're delivering, because they haven't been across the board.
So do you think this is a positive news line then?
It's not when you see the fine print, I'm afraid, Fiona. It's easy to conclude a negotiation if you give the other side what they want. That isn't a success for this country, and particularly, for example, for our fishermen. One of the main beneficiaries potentially from Brexit is that fishermen, and that we could switch back to every year negotiating really hard for them for a deal that's going to work for them. And of course the EU are desperate to stop us doing that, and instead Labour have handed them a 12-year agreement that is not in the interests of British fishermen, and the industry has been very clear about saying that.
Can we just talk about the fishing deal for a minute? Just because obviously what this is a continuation of the deal that the Conservative government brought in, admittedly for much longer. But the government described it at the time as the best possible deal, not only for our fish catching sector, but the industry as a whole. Was that not true?
Fiona, but the point...
Because I assume on that basis you'd be thrilled to see it go on for another 12 years.
As you said yourself, admittedly for a much longer period.
Yeah, but the best possible deal?
The fishing industry were
Was it not the best possible deal?
The fishing industry were clear that we had to maintain a year-by-year negotiating position. Because, of course, if you sign up
but just to be clear, Kieran,
the
government described it as the best possible deal. Now it sounds like the worst possible deal. Which is it?
At that point in time, as a transition immediately out of the long deal that we've been in as part of the EU, that was the best deal that we could secure at that time. But the prospect, as the fishing industry have made very clear, that in the long term we move back to more and more of the fishing stocks coming back to British fishermen. A trade deal, it's not supermarket sweep. You don't get prizes by rushing around,
prices in the
grabbing everything that you can get and saying that's a success. That isn't how negotiations work. You have to be tough sometimes. You have to be willing to say no. And I'm afraid not just on fishing, but on allowing the EU again, the EU courts to have a say in what we do and how we run our country, and on other issues. The mobility scheme, again, bringing free movement back in through the back door. They have surrendered on so many issues. I'm not surprised the EU are quick and wanting to sign that deal.
Zanny, you're sort of laughing halfway through.
I'm not laughing, but I'm kind of chuckling. I think you're both exaggerating. I think it's not a great surrender, but nor is it, I think as the Prime Minister said, the historic start of a new era. This is a relatively sensible deal that modestly reduces some of the worst frictions of Brexit. It doesn't change anything very dramatically. I think the idea of getting rid of the checks on food is very sensible. You're absolutely right. It's sensible for our supermarkets. It's a very sensible idea. I think it's a sensible idea to join the energy market. Data sharing against criminals is a very sensible idea. But none of this is going to be enormously transformative for the British economy. we are going to now be able to take part in European defence spending at a time of increased geopolitical threats. That strikes me as being very sensible. But this is a small and sensible step forward. But basically, the red lines of Brexit, of a hard Brexit, are still there. We're not joining the single market. We're not having freedom of movement. We're not having any of these things. So if I was a Brexiter, which if you look at what we've written, I'm not, I wasn't. But if I was, I would be pretty happy with this, because this is really entrenching a relatively hard Brexit. But what it is doing is setting, I think, taking some of the worst excesses off and putting in place a basis of a more permanent relationship with the European Union that is frankly going to be a little bit like the relationship that Switzerland has, which is ongoing negotiations on certain areas, grown-up, sensible negotiations, not extreme rhetoric. It's not a surrender document. That's complete nonsense. But it's a sensible, modest step forward, but it's not transformative either.
Yes.